America. My name is Osei-Frimpong, and there's this canard out there that what you should do if you want to get thinking about politics is start with local politics, and local politics is where things happen. And I'm saying that actually that's not true. That's not true. Politics itself is soulless business, and local politics is just as soulless. So if you actually want to understand political problems, you have to go where the soul is, and the soul, surprisingly, is in the family. So if you just go into local politics and because you want to do politics, but you don't understand what families mean, then your politics will always be a little bit insipid. You'll have the Pete Buttigieg politics, right? Your politics will always be a little bit insipid. That's tasteless. All right? So with families, you understand that you are responsible for the well-being, for the particularization and well-being of, the kid you create or your spouse. Right? You are responsible for that. And the struggles you have in fulfilling that responsibility, and the struggles you have in fulfilling that responsibility in the way that sustains their personhood and their subjectivity, that is, that is the work of family. That is the work of family. And then being worthy of someone to invest that into you, and all of that is the work of family. And you're raising this kid and sustaining your spouse in a way that respects their humanity and their subjectivity appropriately to their level of development. And unfortunately, the only way you can do that is if you have been let go yourself, or you are aiming your children to be let go, right? So which means that if you want them to make their own decisions, family isn't going to be the place in which they can actually make their own decisions. Children do not make their own decisions. Nobody makes their own anything in family relations. Everything is a concerted effort, which is why one of the reasons why working for a family business can be kind of constraining. You can't quit. You can't go your own way. You can't organize against you. So you need a civil society that deals with the problems that families cause for freedom, right? Not because you want to deal with the soullessness of families. You just want a more free relationship with the people that you are in relationship with. So you have a market-based civil society where now your relationships are mediated by the market under a law, and that is how you can attain a quality of freedom. The problem is, if your livelihood is now based on the market might be indifferent to you in a way that the family's not. But your livelihood now depends on market participation, so you don't have to do what the family says. You can do what you feel like you want to do in the market, but the market is fickle. So what happens then now is you need to think about how do we create markets that actually respect our subjectivity? Because I didn't want to jettison that to just family. Family shouldn't be the only place I am respected as the subject. I need to be respected as a subject in this other place where I'm also more free. But markets won't do it alone, because markets just respect me not as a thoughtful subject, but as like a producer of an alienable good that they'll want, even if that alienable good is my service. So you need a political sphere which respects me as an individual subject, and then will govern the market so that my activity is respected not just for what it produces, but as an individual subject, and then also sustain the family, which I am immediately respected as an individual subject. So further mediations and transformations of the family accounts for all of these other spheres. It's not to say that the other spheres are family. It's been transfigured in a way that actually is qualitatively different. In the same way that life transfigures chemical bonds, in the way that we are all chemical bonds, but we're not merely chemical bonds, right? Chemical bonds are chemical bonds. We are, sustain our ways. We sustain ourselves in life. So that's going to be a little bit different. And you only get it if you understand civil society as emerging from kind of infelicities of the family, and then politics as emerging from infelicities in civil society. And that's how you get the need for families, civil society, and nations all on the march for freedom. And that's how you get a politics that actually understands the importance of the immediate unity of a family and the work of a family, and the meaningful work of a family, and a politics that understands the work and the meaningfulness of civil society, and that's a politics that will actually appreciate it. So if we want a just civil society that appreciates the subjectivity of the workers, we need unions, and like so. You get all of this if you actually start from what families need and what families can do in terms of meaning. And if you just skip steps and go right to civil society, if you just get right to markets, or you get right to politics and you start like, well, I want to start in local politics and grow to bigger politics, you'll confuse about what politics is for. You'll be confused about what politics is for. It's about the self-determination of the market society, and also family right. And so I'm trying to help you not be a political hack, but actually have a decent appreciation for what politics is for. And if you, in order to have a decent appreciation of what politics is for, you don't need to do local politics and grow up. You need to understand what families mean and where families fall short. And where families fall short is where civil society picks in. And where civil society falls short is where politics fits in. In a way that sustains each of these differentiated modes of activity, because they're all kind of forms of freedom, but recognizes that each falls short in a different way. Families fall short because you aren't sufficiently emancipated from your family members. You can't act alone, as it were. You can't determine yourself without them in mind. Civil society falls short because you can determine yourself without having the other person in mind. However, that means your life is being determined, and the goods and services that you are producing and are produced for you are being determined without you in mind. And that's not great either. So what we lose in civil society, we need to make up again in a market that actually respects our subjectivity, and a political society that then governs a civil society that is primed to respect our subjectivity. That will then allow us to recognize the way our subjectivity is handled in the families. And this is why, so that's the general argument. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why the lack of appreciating family, especially on the left, but in general, leads to a kind of soulless politics. Where if you have a distorted understanding of what family means, you're going to have a distorted understanding of what civil society means, because you're just making money for the sake of money. Because you don't understand how the civil society emerged to deal with deficits in the family, and then you won't understand how civil society fails to respect your subjectivity, because your subjectivity is respected in well-organized family. Right? Like what we do for you as an individual, not a consumer, but as an individual. You lose that in civil society. And if you're not aware of that's what families can do, you're not aware of that's how civil societies can fail you, right? Civil society, like, that's not kind of ground in this for you aspect of, in a rich and intimate way, is going to be casual about, firing you or displacing you or telling you to move or get on a bus or whatever. Right. So you go from relationships that are for you, family relationships, to civil society relationships that are actually not for you, and then you recognize that as a problem, and then you need a political sphere that then will govern civil relationships as if those civil relationships are for you, and also sustain families that were for you. But if you don't understand, the meaning of family, these are the people who are going to be at your funerals and at your weddings and stuff. If you don't understand the meaning of families, then you're not going to get the meaning of all these other things. All right, so what's going on? Someone says, please pray for H. Rap Brown. I never, Die, N-Word Die, is that H. Rap Brown's book? H. Rap Brown. I never actually read the book, but I think I've read some quotes, and he was pretty good. I wish him the best. And should I read his stuff? He was arrested in 2000, man. You're too old to be arrested in 2000. What are you doing being arrested in 2000? Okay, I don't know. So I hope he does the West. I hope he does. I hope he's doing very well. Um, I hope he gets better in whatever he's facing. All right, all right. So from last night's topic, I appreciate your analysis that you did on the podcast with the Muslim scholar. He asked you about arcade culture, and you elaborated. I got my gears turning about systems use. Yeah. Okay. So, this person is Mr. Roger Sinkali. Yeah. So, when I was in college, there was a movement to close the arcade at my college, and I didn't care one way or the other, but I was in a position of authority, so people asked my opinion, and I had to listen to arguments. And one of the arguments was, without the arcade, these people will just go home and stay home. And this was in the 90s at the burgeoning internet. So they'll just be sad and alone and atomized. And, that argument stayed with me these years as a pretty good argument to at least slow down before you close arcades. Slow down before you close arcades, because you need what's called third spaces where people can actually interact and meet that aren't necessarily that are more secure than the internet and more closed than the internet, more intimate than the internet, as it were. So that was what I said about arcade politics and why we should actually just think about arcades as third spaces. Oh, thank you, Vinny. And I don't even have to, he just gave $50 in super chat. Thank you. That actually is going to go to good things. It'll probably go to, my family or the channel or something like that. So thank you for the super chat. This is how I feed my family. So thank you for your time. And if you appreciate what I'm doing, go to www.funkyacademic.com. I'll kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month, and I'll keep kind of growing the channel. So once again, the theme of this show is that local politics is not the way to start thinking about politics. Family meaning is the way to start thinking about politics. And from family meaning, you go to where family fails and you need a civil society to step in to allow freedom for family members. But unlike family, civil society is given cold. It's cold. Nobody cares about you as a subjective individual. They just care about what you can produce for them. All right? So that kind of coldness has consequences. For example, you could lose your livelihood. You could just be told to get on a bus. You could be told nothing, that your family doesn't matter. So that's why you need a political sphere to govern civil society, so civil society doesn't grow cold in an untoward way, and that families are not end up being consumed by civil society. Right? And so if you just start with politics, or we just start with market, and if you just assume that people need money more than they need meaningful connection, that's what I'll do. If you just assume that people need money more than they need meaningful connection, then you don't. It'll screw up all of your politics. If you assume that people need meaningful connection, and then money and the earning and the sustaining of money is like a means to facilitate people sustaining meaningful connections, then you can have a politics that started the right way, and you earn and you have a politics that respects people as individuals. Because for connections to be meaningful, it's not meaningful in general. It's meaningful at the individual level. At the individual level. So the first place to be really not drowned, but to lap up the importance of meaningful individual connections is your family. And then once you see that as constraining, you understand that you need a civil society so that you can be free, so the connections are both meaningful but not so constraining. Then you see that having a livelihood depend on civil society is gross in different ways and cold and not particularly meaningful. So you need a politics that'll kind of sustain meaningful activity in civil society and actually protect it in the family. But thank you for your time. Go find those individual meaningful connections that will sustain your life. All right. Peace.